What's with that tattered, cheap thing? Poor people should just go home.
Betty, with her wealth, seemed to think everything I wore looked shabby. She pinched the fabric of my dress as if handling something filthy. Then she took out a glass I'd given her as a keepsake and poured beer into it.
If you don't want to go home, could you please change into something else? I'll pay for the damages.
With that, Betty threw the beer she had poured right at me. A yellow splash danced in the air, drenching my dress.
What are you doing? Why are you upset? It's just a cheap thing. It doesn't matter if it gets dirty. Come on, hurry up and buy some new clothes. $5,000 should be enough, right?
Betty laughed loudly, seeming to enjoy herself. I couldn't stand it. This dress was practically a memento left by my late mother. To have it dirty just because it's cheap? You've done something terrible.
Huh? I said I would pay for it.
She didn't know yet what a mess she'd be in after this. My name is Karen. I'm a working housewife. I had a smooth married life with my husband, whom I'd met at college in my 20s. Life with him was always peaceful. A few years later, our son John was born, and I thought we would live happily ever after as a family of 3. But when John turned 4, my husband was found to have cancer. Pancreatic cancer. It was hard to detect until the symptoms appeared, and by the time we went to the hospital, it was already stage 4 terminal cancer. Despite the fight, my husband passed away a year later. The life I thought would continue had crumbled away so easily. I wondered if I could really raise a child on my own. But even without my husband, John grew up strong and healthy. Watching John always surrounded by friends and laughing brightly, I felt encouraged. I had to make this child happy. I was determined.
When I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor.
Oh, that's wonderful, John. You're smart and kind. You'll definitely be able to do it.
If I become a doctor, I can help people suffering from illnesses like Dad, right?
John said with a slightly lonely smile. I never imagined I'd listen to a child's dream with such a heavy heart. You can save them, definitely. In my heart, I told my husband how strong his son was growing up. Losing my husband wasn't just a painful event. Seeing John trying to live positively made me realize I had to live earnestly too. John grew up healthy, and after intense studying, he went on to medical school and became a doctor, truly. I'll never forget the thrill when he passed the national exam. John, now in his 40s, continues to work as an active doctor. 2 years ago, my son got married. I was worried that he might remain single forever because he was always busy working. But he finally found someone he wanted to share his life with, and I was overjoyed when he told me about his marriage. However, my relationship with Betty, John's wife, wasn't very good. Betty comes from a wealthy family. Her parents work in the city bank, and her grandfather is a bank president. A family of elites I'd never normally associate with. Betty met John at a party, and they married quickly after a year of dating. To be honest, I was worried because John, who was raised in a very ordinary family, might not match up socially. My son is a doctor and has savings, but I wasn't sure if he made enough to meet Betty's expectations. But I couldn't help but see myself and my husband in them. Family background has nothing to do with happiness. If they need each other, then I should support them, so I watched their marriage unfold. However, Betty started to show her true colors after getting married. Perhaps because she was raised in a wealthy family, she seemed to be very selfish, getting angry over everything that didn't go her way. She probably grew up in an environment where she was listened to about everything. Moreover, Betty had a fixation on draping herself in luxury brands from head to toe. To be honest, John and I didn't really see the appeal. Betty was free-spirited, in a bad way. She once even insisted John take a day off work to go shopping with her. My son was at his wit's end, but the values of a couple should be adjusted between them. I thought the best I could do was to watch over them without interfering too much. But after John's study abroad was decided, Betty's behavior escalated. It's only been 2 years since they married, and it must be hard for her to live without her husband. I tried to at least support her, visiting her home to check in. One day, I brought cookies over to Betty, and Betty laughed through her nose.
What's with these tasteless cookies? I'm not eating this.
And tossed the cookies aside. Betty, that's too much, even if you don't like them.
It's because your taste is outdated, right? I don't want to eat something so poor. Besides, Karen, everything about you is cheap, from your face to what you wear.
Betty said that without a hint of regret, laughing. I was shocked. Having wanted to get along, I never imagined my son's wife would talk to me that way. Furthermore, the source of Betty's stress didn't seem to be John's study abroad.
I can't even go shopping without John. There's no one to carry my bags.
It seems Betty treats John like a servant at home. Unlike John, who works as a doctor, Betty holds the title of executive director at a city bank. But it seems to be a title in name only, as she doesn't seem to be working when she goes in.
It's all because John is too lenient. You give him money and spoil him, so the money I can spend freely decreases, and the allowance I get from my parents isn't that much either.
Moreover, she seems to be claiming John's earnings as her own. It may be natural for a couple to share, but as she's almost like a housewife, she needs to be careful with how she spends money. I work from home for a reason. I'm not without earnings, and I'm not taking money from John.
Whether that's true is questionable, right? Aren't you secretly taking it?
Every time I say something, Betty complains like this. She thinks the reason she has less money to spend is because I'm receiving support from John. But I am managing my own expenses on my own. Instead of getting closer to Betty, she used me as an outlet for her stress. In the midst of this, she gave me an unexpected invitation.
Karen, we're having a gathering for Christmas with relatives and coworkers. Would you like to join?
I was surprised. Betty herself inviting me to an important event? Are you inviting me as well as John?
Since it's a special party, make sure you dress appropriately, okay? If we have any shabby-looking relatives, it would be embarrassing for me.
I feel like that was an unnecessary comment, but anyway, I need to choose what to wear for Christmas. Betty probably won't be satisfied unless it's some fancy brand name. But I wouldn't know a high-end dress if it hit me in the face. I decided to consult John about what to wear while updating him on other things. I don't have anything to wear for Christmas. What should I do?
Mom, don't you have some dresses?
Reminded by John, I remembered. Indeed, there are a few dresses that I inherited from my mother.
Mom's dresses are beautiful and will suit you. They'd be perfect for Christmas, I think.
You're right. I'll try wearing one after such a long time. Thank you.
I'll be able to come home for Christmas Eve, too. Looking forward to seeing you, Mom, and Betty.
Hearing John's voice after a long time made me very happy. Then I took out several dresses from my dresser at home to choose one appropriate for New Year's greetings. This one is the most elegant and calm. There was one dress that was different in both craftsmanship and design. This was something very special that my mother had given me just before she passed away. She said it was a gift from someone before she married my father. It was a dress filled with memories, and I had kept it in the closet for years, wondering if it was okay for me to wear it. But this time, I think it's all right. Now I just need to bring a suitable gift. Since Betty and her family like alcohol, I decided to bring some sake and fancy brand tableware. It's only a few times a year we meet. It should be okay to do this much. Even after such a rude comment, it might be foolish to still believe there's a chance to get along. But I still want to build a good relationship with my daughter-in-law. If it doesn't work out, then that's that. And so Christmas arrived. I put on the glamorous dress and went to Betty's parents' house. I was supposed to meet John there, but it seems he hasn't arrived yet. There's no point in waiting at the entrance, so I'll go in first. Betty's family's home was like the large mansions you see in TV dramas. The grand building, like a hotel, was filled with many people. All the beautifully dressed individuals must be Betty's relatives and business associates. In the ballroom, there was a woman whose outfit stood out from the rest. It was Betty, wearing a pitch-black dress and jewel-encrusted accessories. It's not really suitable for Christmas, but it seems no one around her minds. She was talking with a few associates when she saw me. She approached with a puzzled look on her face. Betty, Merry Christmas. This is a little souvenir.
Come here for a sec.
Betty, without listening to my greeting, grabbed my arm and started walking. I couldn't keep up with what was happening. She took me to another room. We entered a quiet room. It was a very spacious room. Why has Betty brought me here? What's going on all of a sudden?
Didn't I tell you not to come dressed like that?
Betty crossed her arms and stood in front of me as she closed the door, her tone dripping with contempt. She snatched the souvenir from my shocked hands, tore off the wrapping paper, opened the lid, and then burst into an exaggerated laugh at the sight of the dishware inside.
What's with this dishware? It's so tacky.
Betty, you like alcohol, right? It's a brand name at least.
Karen, you really have no taste, do you? This dishware, that dress? What's with that ragged, cheap thing?
To affluent Betty, it seemed everything I wore looked impoverished. She pinched my dress as if it was something filthy. She took the glass from the gift I brought and poured the beer she was holding into it.
If you don't want to go home, could you please come back in different clothes? I'll compensate you.
Then Betty tossed the beer from the glass at me.
What are you doing? Why are you mad? It's just a cheap thing anyway. So it doesn't matter if it gets dirty. Hurry up and buy some new clothes. $5,000 should be enough, right?
Betty laughed loudly, clearly amused. I couldn't hold back anymore. This dress wasn't just any piece of clothing. It was akin to a keepsake left behind by my late mother. To see it so carelessly tarnished just because it was cheap looking.
You've done something terrible. What? I told you I'd pay for it.
She was blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit her. What comes next is going to be a mess. This dress cost me $50,000, just so you know.
Excuse me? Planning on billing me with some inflated fairy tale?
Every stitch, every ornament, custom made by a high-end boutique. You like it, don't you? Or can't you tell the difference? I was surprisingly calm as I retorted. At first, Betty laughed off the $50,000 claim, but my firm stance eventually got to her.
That's a lie, right? This drab, poor-looking dress couldn't possibly.
Shall I bring the designer label from home for you? The truth is, the dress was a luxury item. That's why I felt guilty receiving it from my mother, and it took courage to wear it. Unbeknownst to them, they not only scorned it, but dared to tarnish it. You're picky about luxury and brands, but lack the eye for it.
I'm not familiar with dresses.
And that matters how. But it's all right. You'll compensate me, right? The exact same item for the same price? That's what you said, wasn't it? A smile spread across my face, and Betty's complexion went pale. Simultaneously, the room's door swung open.
Hey, isn't that Betty? What are you doing in here? Everyone's been looking for you.
The man who appeared was about my age, and I recognized his face and appearance. Hearing her name, Betty ran to him relieved.
Gramps, what are you doing here? Well, couldn't spot you, so I was searching. What's going on?
The man was smiling kindly, yet there was an unmistakable authority about him. Betty felt it too. Her reply was vague.
Well, what I was doing,
The glass in Betty's hand and my damp attire told a tale. That was easy to guess. The gentleman pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket and gently patted my wet dress dry.
My apologies for my granddaughter's behavior. I know an excellent stain remover, Karen.
Thank you.
You two know each other?
Betty exclaimed in surprise.
Karen was a classmate of mine in college. We're still in touch. You must know her, right? She's a famous screenwriter. She wrote that drama series that's been all the rage lately.
Betty's grandfather responded cheerfully. That's right, I'm a screenwriter. It seemed to be a very surprising fact to Betty.
Huh? That's the first I've heard of it.
I never told you. I make a living writing stories. I hadn't told Betty about working from home because I didn't want my pen name to get out. And I didn't want my work to be belittled by a woman who looked down on working. If I said I was earning money by writing scripts, I knew it would be scoffed at as not a real job. I didn't like revealing the truth this way.
Karen was the bright and kind college Madonna. This dress is what I gave her when she won an award for her script at a public submission.
But this dress was handed down from Mom.
I knew you'd be too modest to accept it directly. It would also be rude to insist on giving it to a married woman, so I told your mom to pass it on when the time was right.
That was a truth I didn't know myself. This dress wasn't a keepsake from my mother, but a gift from the chairman to me. I had won the award after getting married, so maybe he hesitated to give it to me directly. Perhaps my mother had also missed the opportunity to tell me she received it from him. But to think that Betty is your granddaughter, I never imagined.
We haven't seen each other for many decades, so it's natural not to know. And now Betty has gone and done something unforgivable.
Betty was sternly glared at by her grandfather and was nervous.
Karen, may I deal with my granddaughter's punishment? You've come all this way for the Christmas party. Please enjoy yourself, even if it's just for a little while.
He had Betty leave the room and arranged a new dress for me. He said he would remove the stains from the soiled dress and return it later. I gratefully accepted his offer. After changing, I returned to the ballroom, and John had arrived. There was much I wanted to discuss, but the head speech was about to start, so I decided to explain the commotion with Betty later. When Betty's grandfather entered the ballroom, the lively venue fell silent for a moment, and then was filled with a big round of applause.
Thank you all for gathering here today. I have something I want to share with all of you.
The sudden announcement caused a stir in the venue. Betty and I, and even the relatives like John, seemed not to know and were surprised.
Our company plans to open a branch in the countryside to further expand our business. Therefore, I intend to have Betty, my granddaughter, and a member of the board, take charge as the head of the branch. Please watch over her with a warm eye.
The venue buzzed even more. Betty seemed to be hearing about the business expansion and her being the head for the first time. She was sweating and looked shocked. Being the head of a branch may be a promotion for Betty, but in reality, it was more like a demotion. After all, how could she, who has only lived in the city, get by in the countryside? She wouldn't get her hands on the trendy brands as quickly in the city, and so no doubt it would be stressful. Betty looked at her grandfather with eyes brimming with tears, but he just stared back at her unflinchingly. She could feel the unspoken pressure from him to get serious about your age and work hard to hone your management skills in the countryside. The atmosphere of the celebration was entirely joyful, yet Betty seemed so shaken she could hardly stand. Since that day, Betty has been rapidly assigned to work in a regional office without a moment to rest. I was apologized to multiple times about the stained dress, but even if it was family, rude behavior needs to be met with a firm response. In the end, at her grandfather's insistence, Betty agreed to compensate for it.
Karen, I'm truly sorry about what happened. I'll make sure Betty learns her lesson from this.
No, it's fine. Just standing up for me was enough.
Betty's behavior has been a problem for a while. Her extravagant spending and that attitude have been a headache even for us. This might be a good chance to knock some sense into her.
Betty's grandfather said this with a chuckle. Betty is now working hard locally as the head of a regional branch, learning the ropes of management. Chased by unfamiliar tasks and overwhelmed with busyness, she has no time to splurge on designer brands or play around. A punishment that seems immense for someone who lived for luxury. There's another pitiful thing. John returned to California after finishing his studies abroad. But John was set to return to a university hospital in New York, so he and Betty just missed each other. Once again, they started a life apart. However, since that incident, John's heart has been drifting away from Betty.
I knew Betty was naive, but I never thought she was that kind of person. Depending on what she does next, I'm even considering divorce.
John seems to be considering a divorce depending on Betty's behavior going forward. Despite their vows to spend a lifetime together, it's Betty who has led to their marriage crumbling. Her unpleasant nature is unlikely to be wiped away just by working at the branch office, so a divorce seems inevitable. But it's John's life, and it's up to him to decide. I received heartening words from Betty's grandfather, saying that even if we're no longer family, I should not hesitate to ask for help if needed. It's surprising how much a classmate I met by chance has helped. Maybe it was the stress that brought us together. Since then, I've been living a peaceful, everyday life. Other than occasionally checking on John, I'm dedicated to writing scripts. Betty's grandfather has been a fan since my early days and is eagerly waiting for my next script. He suggested I incorporate this incident into my new work, but I politely declined because it doesn't suit my style. To be honest, I don't want to remember Betty's image, even in a fictional world.